On the map, Hulan is simply one of Harbin's districts. But to reach its old town, I had to cross the Songhua River, leave the modern city behind, pass industrial areas, villages, and another river. By the time I arrived, it no longer felt like I was visiting another part of Harbin. It felt like I had entered a separate town. I started the journey near the southern end of Songpu Bridge. It was a hot afternoon, so while waiting for the bus, I went to a nearby park to have on the sun. Unfortunately, I had misunderstood the location of the bus stop. By the time I realized where I was supposed to stand, I had already watched my bus drive away, so my exploration of Fulan begins with another 15 minutes of waiting. Once the bus crossed the Songhua River, the landscape began to change. The dense streets of Harbin gave way to newer residential districts, warehouses and construction sites. Then came fields, villages and long stretches of road with very little around them. We passed the end of Hulan's newer urban area, crossed the Hulan River and finally entered the old town. This geographical separation helps explain why Hulan feels different from most urban districts. Until 2004, it was still Hulan County. Its administrative status changed, but its old center did not suddenly become part of Central Harbin. After getting off the bus, I walked towards the former residence of Xiaohong. The streets immediately felt different from Central Harbin. Some restaurants advertised their prices directly on their signs, like 5 yuan casseroles and tiny skewers for 25 cents each. Xiaohong was born here in 1911 and later became one of the best-known Chinese writers of the 20th century. Her novel Tales of Hulan River was based on the town where he grew up. Rather than presenting Hulan's major historical events, he wrote about his households, customers, neighbors, and ordinary tragedies that made visiting her home feel especially appropriate. It was not a grand monument separated from daily life. It still looked like a northern Chinese family compound. Inside were old heated brick beds, wood burning stoves, dressing tables, baskets, and agricultural tools. Some objects were protected under glass, while others were simply placed inside the rooms. I could not tell which objects were original, which had been restored, and which was later reconstructions. But the limited barriers made the room feel less like a sealed museum display and more like a place that had only recently been occupied. The complex was larger than it first appeared, with 2 courtyards and dozens of rooms, but each individual room remained small and domestic. There were all photographs of Xiaohong and her family, passages about her life, and a few objects connected with the period. There were not many visitors that afternoon, so many of the courtyard was quiet. Even the gift shop was unusually discreet, instead of forcing every visitors to walk through it on the way out. It was hidden near the outer wall. Next door was Xiaohong Memorial Wall, a more conventional museum covering her life, travels, and writing. It displayed photographs, documents, books, and a small number of personal objects. Together, the two places show different versions of the same person: the historical writer inside the museum, and the child from Hulan inside the old family home. From there, I took another bus towards Xigang Park. Before reaching the park, I stopped at an older shopping plaza. Upstairs, there were shops selling clothes, appliances, and bedding. But most of the building was extremely quiet. The busiest place appeared to be the restaurant beside the entrance. Outside the building, however, the public square was full of people. Groups of middle-aged and elderly residents were sitting beneath the trees, talking, playing card games, and watching the street. The contrast continued as I walked through the surrounding commercial area. There was a hospital, small clothing shops, restaurants, and an old indoor market. These were not tourist facilities. They were the ordinary services of a town that handled most of its daily needs locally. The indoor market sold clothes, household goods, fried foods, and decorative objects. Near the entrance, the food stall still had customers. But further inside, many counters were empty or closed. Outside one entrance, someone had hung a Lakers banner upside down. Across the road was a completely different scene. An outdoor market stretched along both sides of the street, selling vegetables, fruit, cooked meat, fried food, and staple dishes. The indoor retail places had been quiet, but the street market was active. People were buying ingredients for dinners. Taxis and electric tricycles were squeezing through the remaining space, and almost every stall accepted mobile payment. Rather than treating this as a simple contrast between old and new, it seemed more like a contrast between different kinds of commerce. The places built for browsing were struggling. The place selling food and everyday necessities was still busy. At the end of the market was Xigang Park. Vendors near the entrance sold toys, coins, and chances to win prizes by throwing plastic rings. Inside, it looked like an ordinary municipal park. People were walking, exercising, or sitting beneath the trees during the late afternoon. But hiding inside this otherwise normal park was something I had not expected to find in Hulan. This building was almost completely covered in climbing plants. Inside was a cactus planted in 1896. It was now 130 years old and has grown more than 10 meters tall. Metal supports hold up its enormous branches, making it look less like a house plant and more like a small forest. It holds a domestic record issued by Shanghai Guiwu Records. Outside the greenhouse, several groups of men were playing chess. By this point, I had seen similar gatherings in many places. Squares, pavements, and patches of shade was being used as places to meet, play games, and spend the afternoon without needing to buy anything. I left the park through a side entrance and entered another residential area filled with food cars and small shops. Near one white building was a cluster of halal restaurants. It might have been connected to the local Muslim community. From there, I took a taxi to one of Hulan's most distinctive landmarks. Hulan Catholic Church is larger than I expected. Its grey brick facade and two towers rest above the surrounding residential buildings, yet the space around it did not feel like a preserved historical zone. There was a public square, outdoor exercise equipment, and a basketball court filled with local residents. The church was the architectural center of the scene, but the daily life continued around it as if it was simply another similar part of the neighborhood. After leaving the church, I followed my navigation app toward what was supposed to be a bus stop. The road took me through residential streets and eventually into a much quieter area. On one side was newly built apartment tower. On the other side was old brick houses, construction barriers, and undeveloped land. The bus stop was apparently somewhere nearby, but I couldn't find a practical way to leave from there. For the second time that day, public transport and I had failed to understand each other. so I called another taxi. My next stop was one of the largest shopping centers I could find in Old Hulan. It contained the similar symbols of contemporary urban China: KFC, Pizza Hut, Luckin Coffee, a large supermarket and stores selling Huawei's phones. But much of the ground floor was empty and being renovated. Upstairs was appliance shops, an arcade, and a small cinema. The arcade and cinema had attracted some younger customers, while many of the ordinary retail areas remained quiet. There was a modest commercial center, closer to what I would expect in a small county-level city than in the center of a major provincial capital. Outside the mall, I discovered that Hulan had shared an electric scooter. I had not seen shared bicycles in the old town. Here, electric scooters appeared to fill that role instead. I rented one and rode towards the Hulan River. The riverbank was calmer than the commercial streets. A paved path ran along the flood control embankment. People were walking, sitting on benches, and coming outside as the temperature began to fall. Earlier in the day, I had encountered Hulan through Xiaohong's memory. Now I was looking at the river that gave her book its name, surrounded by the town as it exists today. I came here expecting to visit a few landmarks. Instead, what stayed with me was the structure of the town itself. It has its own historical center, markets, hospitals, religious buildings, shopping streets, and gathering places. Administratively, it belongs to Harbin, but in everyday life, it still seems to face inward towards its own streets and its own river. Near the bus stop back, I found an entire street of barbecue restaurants preparing for the evening. Tables and chairs was being placed beneath the right audience. But I didn't have enough time to stop for barbecue before the last convenient bus. So after traveling all the way to Hulan, I ended the day with a very ordinary bowl of rice noodles. Perhaps that is the best way to leave a place like Hulan, with the feeling that this day was continuing, even though mine had already ended.